Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sumrok Studios. I am your host Carl Dean, and for the last several weeks we have been meeting with some of our top service providers. These are again service providers in the industry of apartment investing, so whether it be syndication attorneys, title companies, property management companies, or just talking to some of the investors within the Sumrok group. Our goal here is really to help educate everyone who may be surfing the web trying to figure out more about how to syndicate apartments, how to do it legally, where to get management, how to do due diligence, things like that. We're just trying to give you guys more educational content to help you navigate through this this business of multifamily investing. So today I have with me one of our top service providers, Mr. Mauricio Rauld.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like we're on the Johnny Carson show here.
we're doing our best, right? So Mauricio and I go back quite a bit, you guys. So I first met you working with the real estate guys. Right. So we were a turnkey single family provider and we were providing assets to some other clients. We were big fans of their radio show. Still are, and we did a lot of little different events. I think we met on like maybe a cruise or something.
For sure. I mean, the Summit at Sea. I mean, we've been going that for over 10 years, so that's probably what it was.
So you were like their main syndication attorney. You were their guy, I remember.
Yeah, no, and I still am. And so I mean, I met the real estate guys, Robert and Russ specifically. I don't know, it's been like 15 years now.
Oh wow.
And it's kind of a cute little story, but I was cute. Maybe that's not the right word, but it was a good little story. So I was literally attending a birthday party in Miami. And I was looking for something to read on the way back, on the flight. And I'm just flying to the bookstore and I'm just checking it out. And I came across this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Purple book, right? And those days I hated books with the word rich in it. So I'm like, I'm not freaking buying this thing. I'm gonna go, and I looked through the whole store looking for a different book, and I came back to it, and it was like the #1 New York Times bestseller. I'm like, whatever, screw it, let's just get it. I got nothing else to read. So obviously read that book on the plane, just freaking blew my mind, changed my world, all that stuff.
How old were you at this time?
This was when I was probably in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s.
Yeah, I was about 17 when I found the book, and I think everybody has that similar Rich Dad Poor Dad story, right? Like that. If he only knew how many millionaires he's made because of that.
Oh my God! So literally the week after I get back, I'm driving, my car in Southern California, and I hear Robert Kiyosaki's drop-in for the Real Estate Guys radio show. So it was like, hey, this is Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you're serious about investing in real estate, check out the Real Estate Guys. They really know what they're talking about. Had I not read the book, that would have just been like, whoo, like going to bed. And they were doing an event down in Southern California. They're up in the Northern California. So they were doing a huge event down. So I went to that, and that kind of started my relationship with those guys to the point where at some point I remember Russ coming to me and saying, hey, do you know any lawyers that we could hire? Because right now meaning Russ, I'm doing all the legal work, which is a scary thought right off the bat.
Yeah.
So after asking a couple questions, I just figured, what about me? Like, that seems cool. At the time I was working at this law firm, which was an amazing law firm. I mean, law firms have this reputation of being like really hard. They just a lot of hours. They just work you to death. I was working at a really good family-oriented law firm, but I was going through what most people go through, before they realize this whole rat race thing. Like, I was getting up in the morning, I was showering, getting dressed, getting in my car, driving to work, working all day, working all night, going home. Maybe doing a little bit and then go to bed and do it all over again. And I'd go in on weekends, and I'd see partners that had been at the firm for 20, 30 years that I know had families, and they're at like 7 a.m. on a Sunday. And I'm like, there's got to be more than that. But this can't be. I can't be doing this till I'm 65 years old. There's got to be something better. And reading that book was kind of the answer. It just like, I just remember reading the book saying, yes, 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 yes. Yeah. And so that was kind of the impetus. Really, that's the reason how I met the real estate guys. And then they introduced me to sort of the Rich Dad organization, which actually introduced me to Tom Wheelwright, who ultimately, introduced me to my wife indirectly. So it's all been good. It's all been good,
you're all over the place. All the major players know who Mauricio Rauld is, right? So, and I remember, obviously, so we've done a couple of the cruises, the annual cruises, which are great. I mean, super high level.
They're summits at sea.
Summit at sea.
Robert would be upset if you call it a cruise.
So sorry, Robert.
It's a seminar that just happens to be on a cruise ship.
Okay, yeah, and it's a very, very good time, honestly. I remember my first time attending, and it's G. Edward Griffin and Robert Kiyosaki, and it's just like
Simon Black.
Yeah, and I'm sharing a cab in Mexico with Robert Kiyosaki and like a financial advisor, and I'm just like, what is my life right now? This is like my biggest dream ever, right? And then speaking on stage next to somebody like that, it's like, this guy's an icon, right? And he's speaking at our event actually in August, which is our AMATCon event, which is our annual National Apartment Investor Conference. It's for all types of real estate investors. Robert Kiyosaki will be there. He is our keynote. So just to make a side note of that, buy tickets.
And be prepared, because he is, he has no filter. So
Yes.
he's gonna drop a couple F-bombs. He's an old military guy.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, but he definitely had
You'll
no
notice
filter,
the uncensored on all of the flyers, right? So but he's a great guy. I think he's responsible for a lot of people's careers.
Yeah.
And we all kind of shared that, obviously,
Yeah.
all of the people in the Real Estate Guys group. And then afterwards, after I stopped with the single family stuff, I ventured down to Belize
Right.
to work on the Real Estate Guys deal with Beth Clifford as well.
Right.
And that's where, again, we
You can't get rid of me.
Yeah,
You show up down in Belize and
we're
I'm
neighbors.
there.
I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
Mauricio lives here. Okay, now we're hanging out in Belize, and so we've
Right.
been in multiple countries hanging
Yeah.
out, and kind of
Yeah.
we've grown close over
Yeah.
the years, and I definitely consider Mauricio a friend and a very good attorney.
Thank you.
So, I appreciate all the knowledge you've shared with me over the years, especially at your office back in Belize when I
Yeah.
would come there and pick your
Right.
brain and waste your time all
Right,
day.
right.
So thank you for that. But let me ask you this: what made you decide to get into the legal work? Like, what was it? What was the turning point? Was there like an aha moment, or?
You want the real answer?
I want
or
the
do you
real
or do
answer.
you want the PC
Honestly,
answer?
Let's do the real answer.
The real answer is, honestly, I had no idea what else to do.
Yeah.
Like, I literally went to college, went up to Cal Berkeley, and it was like a political science major, which is kind of a worthless major.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been a history. I'm like, well, what do you do with those things? And I had
don't
no clue what I was going to do. I had literally no clue. And one of my dear friends, family friends, who's actually my godbrother, he was an attorney. And he had become, I think he was a history of political science major. So I was kind of looking at him, and I was kind of going toward that path. But honestly, maybe looking for something else. That wasn't really I never had a dream to become a lawyer, right? I really was into real estate, and back then I remember those guys. What is it, like the Carlton Sheets of the world? Those late night infomercials,
yeah.
right? With Tommy, what is it, Tommy Woo?
Woo, yeah,
Whatever.
Woo.
So I was
love
like,
that guy, by the
you're like
way.
you're a loser, you loser. So that was kind of so I was like into real estate, and I'm like, well, if this is it, like if I'm going to go into real estate, then I got to do it before I go to law school, because once I go to law school, whatever, and just procrastinated, never did anything there, and so I ended up going to law school. And got lucky enough to get hired by a pretty large firm in California, where it was a litigation firm. So I did all basically my role started when the what hit the fan, and I would get the complaint, and I would represent all these securities brokers, the J.P. Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, the Merrill Lynch's and stuff. And but I was on the litigation side, which is on the back end. So I would respond to the complaints. I'd go to trial, depositions, all that stuff.
Sounds fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Writing a lot of motions, appellate work, all that stuff. It was actually fun, because I got to get out of the office and go to court and argue and do stuff. But what's cool now is that I actually can use that experience, because I know what it's like on the back end. And now there's two nice things. Number one, now I'm working on the front end. But the other cool thing is now we're all aligned. So what's really cool now is that when I have clients, they want to work with me because they know they need me or a securities attorney to get to where they want to go. So they're excited, right? When you're in litigation, there's there's somebody that you're on the other side. There's conflict. You're always fighting.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like it's a crappy vibe. But with syndication work, like I said, everybody's aligned. Everybody has the same goal. Everybody's excited. So it's been a great transition, because I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And then with the Rich Dad book, that kind of was the impetus for me to leave. Went to work with Robert and Russ in-house. I was their general counsel for
I didn't know that.
I was the general counsel. I did all of their syndications. Back then, they were doing a lot of active syndications, and so I was doing all their work. And then I slowly just kind of transitioned into my own firm. I started my firm in 2006, and kept them obviously as a client. But now I, just kind of on my own, obviously, and been doing pretty well. Not only the syndication, I used to do a lot of their asset protection as well, which I don't do asset protection anymore, but I do it for my syndication clients, which I found is a nice little benefit. A lot of people are interested in it, and so I'll sit down and put together an asset protection structure or review their existing structure and make sure that not only the syndication piece, but their overall, all of their assets, their personal property, their whatever other stocks, bonds, whatever else they own is protected as much as we can.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
definitely something I think is a bonus, obviously.
Yeah.
I hate to deal with too many attorneys.
Right, no, right.
And it's like once you know somebody and you trust
Yeah.
somebody and you have that kind of relationship, if they can do both, it
Yeah.
works out for
Yeah.
your benefit, obviously. So, so I've seen a ton of your videos recently on Facebook.
Cool.
Which I love. Looks like you're shooting
Thank
them
you.
at the house.
Yeah.
Which is great. I
Yeah.
love the authenticity
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it, right? It's just
Yeah.
raw, real,
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely valuable. If you guys haven't seen those, please do try to check those out. But let's talk about, some of your favorite topics on there, obviously, because
Yeah.
it's the same stuff that I want to talk about
Yeah.
here. Let's start with, for anybody who's not aware of the process of syndicating an apartment, and I want to make sure that we don't overstep that and just assume everybody knows, right? So let's talk about when you're syndicating an apartment deal, which syndicating, I'm just going to make this as easy as possible. Syndicating obviously is raising money from multiple people to fill the equity portion to secure debt, right? So you're syndicating, you, me, and Joe and 20 other people are putting our money together. That's a syndication. It's raising capital together to purchase an asset. Now, there's a few different ways you can structure that, and they all have different kind of, what you're allowed to do.
Right.
Explain just for the people as easily as you can,
Yeah.
as simplified as you can make it.
Yes.
The different types and kind of what their restrictions are.
Yeah. Well, let's backtrack a teeny bit before I go into that. So a lot of people ask me, and I think I discussed this in some of the videos, like, well, why is this even a security? Like, why is the SEC? I'm just buying a multifamily apartment complex. Why is the SEC involved? And the reason is their definition of a security is really broad. Like most people think of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, whatever. But under the definition of the SEC, a side contract, a promissory note, a profit sharing agreement, TIC agreements. I joke, handshake, high five, whatever. The structure itself doesn't matter. Anytime you take money from investors where the returns are generated by your efforts, you're dealing with a security.
Yep.
And that's why the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, is involved. And the thing to recognize is once you're dealing with the security, there's really three things we focus on. One is you either have to register that syndication or that security with the SEC, or you need to find an exemption to registration, or it's illegal.
Okay.
That's simple.
Okay.
So obviously we don't want to do illegal stuff.
Yep.
Hopefully nobody wants to do illegal stuff. We don't want to register a full-blown registration. That just takes too much time and too much money. When you get in a contract for a building, you've maybe got 30, 60, 90 days to close. The SEC is going to take a year plus. Like, you don't have time to wait for the SEC. It's also dealing with the government, so it's very inefficient. You're spending tons of money. Most people spend 6 figures. I had a client spend 7 figures on an oil and gas deal to get that done. So it's just not something we want to do.
Yeah.
There's one thing that we could do, which is kind of called a mini registration, but a full-blown registration, forget it. So then we come to the exemptions, which is really where I live. That's the world. We're always looking for an exemption. And luckily for us, there's a couple of exemptions that pretty much everybody uses, maybe 95% of the syndicators use, and there's particular reasons for that, but let's go through some of those. So the most common ones you probably heard of before are these Reg Ds, Regulation D, which there's 2 of them in particular that are used, which are these 506, and this is probably as technical as we're going to get. So 506B as in boy and 506C as in Charlie.
And these are both Reg D.
These are both Reg Ds, and they both have different rules and that we need to follow in order to be able to rely on that exemption. 506B is probably the most common because you can raise an unlimited amount of money, which is nice, right? That's why even the big boys, the Goldman Sachs, JP Morgans, Merrill Lynch's, they use 506B to raise $1 billion. So whether you're raising 100 grand or $1 billion, you can use 506B. You can take up to 35 non-accredited investors, as long as they're sophisticated. And just so we don't leave anybody behind, an accredited investor is anyone who has $1 million of net worth, excluding their personal residence, or they've earned $200,000 the last couple of years with a reasonable expectation of earning that amount this year. So a lot of syndicators, especially first-time syndicators, they're relying on their friends, their family, people they know in their network. Inevitably, there's some people that are non-accredited. And so this exemption is one of the few ones that actually does allow you to have non-accredited investors up to 35, again, as long as they're sophisticated. So that's a nice benefit.
So let's real quick try to classify what a sophisticated investor is.
Sure, it's just anybody who has the knowledge and the expertise to be able to properly evaluate the merits and the risk in the investment. That's essentially what a sophisticated
So understanding how the underwriting works and how the
correct.
return works and all that.
Correct. Which is why, Brad's program is so amazing, is because when you go through his program, you become a sophisticated investor. You've gone through the courses, you know everything. So if you're a syndicator, you know that all the investors that are in there are sophisticated, and obviously it's a mechanism for you to get there. So that's one of the nice things about Brad's program. The reason it's so popular, there's really 2 reasons it's popular. Number one is it's a safe harbor. and I'll get to the other, there's still a couple things, but the reason this is popular is the safe harbor, meaning if we hit all these 5 or 6 points, we're assured of complying. Right?
Okay.
So there's no guesswork, there's no, no interpretation, no arguing or whatever. And then the other really major issue, or the reason it's so popular, is because it preempts state law, and that's just a fancy way of saying we don't have to worry about the states, other than we still can't commit fraud.
Yeah.
So there's anti-fraud provisions, but essentially the federal law preempts state law. It supersedes the state law, so we don't have to worry about the states. In the exemptions that we do, you literally have to go to each state that you sold into and hire a local attorney and make sure you're complying with 5, 6, 7, 8 different states, which obviously takes time and money. So we don't want to do that. The main drawback from a 506B is that you're not allowed to advertise or generally solicit.
Okay.
And that's
So even if you are on Facebook and you are in an exclusive, even if you started the group.
Right.
Like say I started
That's right.
my own Facebook group that's
Yeah.
like Joe Blow in real estate
Right.
investing, and all these people join
Right.
that group. And
Right.
even if I do have personal connections with them, I can't advertise to
You
them.
cannot advertise to them. You have to have, the easiest way to get around that is you have to have a pre-existing substantive relationship with those investors. So even if you started your own group, you have to get to know them. And so what I typically recommend is if you're starting a group or you have a podcast or whatever you're doing, just take the time to get to know those people individually. Like literally you pick up the phone, talk to them for 15 or 20 minutes, get to know them, figure out if they're sophisticated, provide some questionnaires. There's actually some guidance from the SEC as several
Okay.
steps that you can take from taking somebody that you don't know, that you just met, put them through these steps to the point where you've established a substantive relationship with them, at which point you can offer them a future deal.
Okay.
I think one of my videos went through all those 7 steps. The basic ones are having a phone call or a meeting with them, doing a questionnaire, encouraging them to ask questions, and again, just getting to know them. And there's no magic timeline. It's not like this 30-day cooling off period or whatever. It's really the quality of the interactions that the SEC is focused on.
Okay.
So that's the main limitation, which is why the other exemption came in, which I'll touch upon in a second. And then just a couple other things. You can't have, another negative is, well, not negative, you can't have any what's called bad actors. So if you or more importantly your partners, your co-sponsors have been either sanctioned in the past by some regulatory body for securities violations or whatever, maybe they got a cease and desist. Certainly if they got convicted of securities fraud, but that's typically not the case. But if you're a bad actor, then if that happened before September 13, you have to disclose that. If it happened after September 13, you cannot do the syndication with them. So that's one way you can do an illegal offering, is if you partner with someone. I always encourage people, make sure you do your due diligence on your partner, because if it turns out that person's been, again, convicted of something or sanctioned, then you're engaged in an illegal offering. And the penalties for an illegal offering, look, the odds of you going to jail are, I don't want to say none, but they're very slim. But you're essentially guaranteeing the investment. Right? Who wants to guarantee investor in investment?
The bad boy carve out
Right.
guy, right?
So if you raise $1 million and it goes south, no fault of your own, if you haven't complied with the securities laws, then you're required, assuming you have the capital, to return the money and also provide them with whatever the legal interest rate is. So you just don't want to be in that. But nobody's in the business of guaranteeing people's investment. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
So that's 506B.
Yeah.
So what happened is, because of that restriction with the advertising, that was like, we just come out of a recession, and there was like, people were all frozen up. Congress passed the Jobs Act in 2012, and part of this included this expansion where they allowed you now to basically advertise and generally solicit without technically going public. So you're not going public, but now you're allowed to advertise, you're allowed to solicit. So now you can go on Facebook and knock yourself out. You want to put an ad in the Super Bowl, knock yourself out. Go on radio shows, podcasts, no limits. If you want to pitch your deal directly, no problem. The only limitation or limitations is that you can only accept accredited investors, and you must take what's called reasonable steps to verify that they are accredited.
Yeah, so to fill the form, right?
Well, no, it's more than that. So on the 506B, you can check the form. You give them a questionnaire. They check the box. They say you're accredited. You can rely on that. With this one, you cannot. So you actually have to dig deeper into it. And
get their PFS and whatnot? Or?
well, the easiest way to do it is, well, if you're relying on the income, for example, you're saying, hey, I'm a doctor, I earn $250,000. Well, let me see your W-2s, let me see your tax returns, let me see your 1099, whatever. If I'm alleging that I've got $1 million in net worth, well, let's look at bank statements, let's look at property appraisals or what have you. I personally recommend not dealing with that at all, because especially if you've just met them, when you ask for financials, it's a little awkward. So there are a lot of third-party verification companies that will do that for you.
Yeah.
And you don't see the financials. So they'll dig into and they do whatever they need to do.
To verify.
And then to verify.
And they take the liability.
They take the liability. They give you a deliverable that says, look, I've gone through the due diligence. Carl Dean is accredited, and you then can rely on that. The other easy way to do it, honestly, even before you do the third-party verification, is just a CPA letter. You can get a CPA verification letter from your CPA. They obviously know your financials, they know your situation, so they can also attest to that. And it can be a lawyer, it can be a broker, it can be other, but the CPA is typically the one.
And that's much easier and probably more comfortable
it's
for a lot of people.
super easy. You know, I've come up with templates, and so all we do is we send that template to the CPA. They put the letterhead on it, they sign it, and you're done. So that's probably the easiest way. But those are the only restrictions. And so that kind of opened up the world. You know, at least when it came out, I was like, this is exciting. You know, now your world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. Surprisingly, not too many people are use it. I think the last statistic I saw was about 92% of these Reg Ds were still 506B, and the other only 8% were these 506Cs. And I think the reason is I think some accredited, especially sophisticated investors, you know, if they've got options of 5 different deals and 4 of them don't require financials and 1 does, all else being equal, you know, they'll probably go with the other 4. I think that's the main reason, because otherwise, I mean, especially these days with Facebook and Facebook ads and seminars and webinars, and I mean, marketing's pretty cool. So. So I'm a big fan of 506C, but not everybody likes it.
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit more legwork that people are looking at with verifying and having to be responsible for making sure that those people are accredited investors. And for again, a lot of the ways with Facebook and all these networking groups and whatnot, the way it's set up, it's almost there's enough people out there where you kind of build your list, because that's not general solicitation, right? If you know somebody, you get their business card, and let's say you put them on an email list.
Yeah.
Right?
So the way I described it in my video is we assume that you've obtained these names legally, meaning you haven't advertised. But there are ways to do it. So for example, if you have a podcast, right, you're adding value. You're not pitching a deal. You're not even talking about it. You're just adding value. And there's a way for you to capture emails. And so you get those people on your email list. You have no idea who these people are. Similarly, even with Facebook, like you don't really know they're friends, but let's be honest, you don't know them. But if they reach out and you connect, or same with Bigger Pockets, and so there's ways for you to collect info, names that you don't know, and so then you just put them through this process, these 6 steps. I think there's 6 or 7. There's a no action letter called Citizen VC, which the SEC basically walks through these 7 steps and said, look, if you do these 7 steps, you're good. And so you can walk through those steps, and then you can offer them a future deal, because you have to have a pre-existing substantive relationship with these people. So, and that pre-exists your offering. So even once you've gotten to know them, like Carl, you and I met, we spent some time together, we're on the phone, and I say, you know what, today is the day Carl and I have a substantive relationship. Great. I can only offer you the future deal. I can't offer you a deal I already have. I've got to wait till the next one to offer you.
But you plant the seed, like, hey, on the next deal.
The next one. At that point, so it's important if you're using a CRM or even if it's an Excel spreadsheet, you always want to keep track of how you found this person, where you found them, all the steps you've been taking, so that at any point you can prove, hey, Carl Dean, I met him on the Real Estate Guys cruise. On this day we talked. Some people take to the next level and they record the conversations with everybody's permission, but they build a file. And the idea is just that you can show. So what I would do is just make sure you tag, or you make sure you highlight the people that you don't know yet, to make sure you don't send them that email blast. And then once you've established a substantive relationship, then you can kind of switch them over to that list. And so for the next one, you can blast it out and offer them your deal.
Okay. So those are the 2 more basic.
Those are the 2
guys.
And then the other one that I like quite a bit, it's a little bit more involved. And I think you and I maybe disagree on this one, so it'll be a good conversation. But there's another exemption called Regulation A, as an Apple, Reg A, and sometimes referred to as this mini IPO, which is why I talked about the mini IPO versus the full-blown registration. And the nice thing about the Reg A is that it allows you can only raise up to $50 million. So there's some limitations here, Carl. You can't just go crazy.
I'm not
right?
gonna,
50,
yeah.
So $50 million.
Syndicators raise more than $50 million.
$50 million, and you have to do what's called a mini registration with the SEC. It's not a full blown, but it does still take about 6 months.
Yeah.
So if you're
this happens. I just want to point this out. So the Reg A's typically happen before you have a deal.
Right.
You're setting this up. You're going to raise funds, and then with the execution of, hey, when we find a deal after we're funded, It happens far before.
It does, because again, it doesn't work when you have a project specific, because you've got 90 days to close.
Exactly.
It's going to take 6 months. You don't have time.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do a fund, which means you're going to take the money in first, and you're basically explaining to the investor, here are my parameters. I'm going to take your money. I'm going to buy, real estate in this marketplace, maybe LT, whatever the parameters are. But you collect the money first, and once you have the money in the bank, then you go out and find deals. Well, that's a fund. For that, Reggae works really well because you've got time. You're not, you could be doing other deals in the meantime. But over that 6 months, you create this fund, you register it, you get it approved. And the nice things about this is, number one, you can advertise and solicit, just like 506C. With the kicker is that you can take non-accredited investors.
Correct.
Now, there's some limitations. You can't take all their money. You can take a limit of 10% of their net worth or their income, whatever is highest. So there's still some limitations, but it's an attractive for many people that want to take non-accredited or need to take non-accredited, but they also want to advertise. It may work. Now, before we went on air, you mentioned, which is a very legitimate concern, is that the limits, when people use Reg A's, they typically take a lot less limits. So people are investing, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, as opposed to the 50.
You have 150 people on.
So you end up with a bunch of different people, which can become, and a lot of them are non-accredited, and so.
So they have 100 questions.
Right,
that's my thing. It's
yeah.
You give me $5,000, you don't really know the script, what we're doing, and I'm answering emails, and my staff is answering emails.
And if things go sideways, that's when they really.
Then they start freaking out.
Yeah, because when they're non-accredited, it's a lot more percentage of their net worth, their income. So if it goes south, they're more worried. And certainly, if you're looking for a cash call, which hopefully nobody wants to do, but if then you go to an accredited investor who's put in $100,000 and he's worth $1 million, and you ask for $10,000, no problem. If I put in $5,000 and you need to put another $5,000, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
So. And it's the same issue with the other exemption, which I don't know anybody who uses this, by the way, which was everybody's super excited about this thing called regulated crowdfunding, which came out right after 506C. And it's the same thing. It's like you can take non-accredited, but there's such a limit of like $2,000 or 5% of their net worth, or that you end up taking people at $500 and $1,000. Like you'll end up with hundreds, if not thousands, of investors, which sounds like a nightmare. Which is why
it does. It's a little overwhelming. I think about, man, I used to like all these people, one-off people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I notice a lot of those people who are doing Reg A's, and this is just my personal experience and preference, right? We've been in the world of a lot of accredited, a lot of sophisticated investors, a lot of money and capital in the market, and we are very connected with all these people. So for me, it's like, why would I want to do a Reg A?
Absolutely.
There's other people who don't have particularly maybe these connections, but they have a lot of influence, and then they're saying, hey, let's do a Reg A because I have influence all these people who would give me 1,000 or 5,000, and then. The flip side of that is, I think about all the legwork involved with all these different people and all this, and it's just like.
It's a lot, and but you forget, you're spoiled because you're in the Brad group, right? So everybody who's in the Brad group is great because you have access to this network. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, well, how do I go raise money? And I'm like, go join Brad's group.
Right.
You've got so if you're in Brad's group, then maybe Reg A doesn't make sense because you've got access to this. But remember, not everybody is in Brad's group, right? You haven't reached everybody yet. So if you're out there and you have no idea, your sphere of influence is pretty limited, or you've run out of money, you've already tapped out your friends, family, and people, and now you need to go advertise. It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, no, I would just say if you are considering joining anybody's Reg A, the sponsor, the key sponsor, the person putting together the fund or putting together their deal, always has a portion of the equity, right? And typically you'll see anywhere from 10 to 20% on a deal where there's it's a Reg D type deal. Sophisticated and accredited investors. Anything over 20%, it's got to be a home run deal, and the guy's got to be an absolute hot shot, winning a lot of money. Just make sure you look over the documents and really analyze the percentage that person is taking, because what I see with a lot of Reg A's is the person who's putting that fund together is taking a significant portion, 35%, sometimes 40%. It's just, to each their own, right? The fact that you're investing is a good thing, but you want to make sure, because again, all you have to do is be sophisticated, right? Understand how to underwrite and understand these deals. And then, you don't have to be an accredited investor, and then you have the opportunity to invest in deals where the sponsor's probably taking a little bit less, and so the return might be a little bit better. So that would be my only advice is make that decision for yourself, but educate yourself before you do that.
And it's a lot more expensive too, so it comes out of the project, so it eats up in your numbers. I mean, a Reg D, you can probably all in, maybe it's 15, 20 grand or whatever, but a Reg A is more like 70 or 80 grand because again, you're dealing with a government, you're dealing with government lawyers, you're going back and forth negotiating. It's a lot more time consuming, a little bit more complicated. So that's it's a drawback, and also cuts into your numbers.
Which is it probably justifies why the person takes more of the equity. The lead syndicator person putting it together, but at the same, I just advise everybody to educate yourself, right? I think that there's a lot of people who are kind of getting wind of the trend right now and putting these things together. So I would just be wary, just make sure you educate yourself, listen to Real Estate Guys podcast, listen to your shows, things like that, and just try to educate yourself.
But just also realize that when you see people out there that are advertising and they're accepting non-accredited, it's probably because they're doing a Reg A. It's not that they're doing an illegal offering or anything like that. It's probably a Reg A when you see, like Grant Cardone comes to mind. He's been doing Reg A's now, and that's what he does. And he's got experience, right? Yeah. He's not only does he have the real estate experience and the influence over so many people, but there's some smaller groups that I can think of that are taking pretty large percentages, and I get it. It teach their own, but just educate yourself. Like I said, but if you're in Brad's group, there's really honestly
there's no need for that. Trust me, there's enough investors and enough capital, and they're all sophisticated. They're all studying this stuff. It is. You don't go to a Brad event and talk about anything but making deals happen, right? What are you doing? What am I doing? This is where I'm at. This is where you're at. How do we get more deals? Let's meet. Let's have coffee. So I love that. I always advise everybody. I have a lot of friends who are investors who have been kind of on the fence, about Brad's group, and I tell them all the same thing. Look, it doesn't matter if you feel like you need the education or not. This is a group of investors that all they do is buy apartments. So if that's your goal and you want to get over the goal line, surround yourself and submerge yourself with people who are doing what you want to do. And the way to do that is to join the group, right? It doesn't have to be about the education all the time. If you're already a sophisticated investor, now all of a sudden you have all of these people who are ready and willing and wanting to invest in your deal.
And what's also really cool is that I'm seeing that a lot of people are taking the lead and creating kind of their sub little meetup groups, the Brad meetup groups in different parts of the country, because everybody's there. So it's kind of really cool because you can be in. I'm in Southern California. There's groups there. If you want to be in Oklahoma, there's a group there. In New York, New Jersey, whatever. So it's
helpful, and it's growing. I'm really proud to be part of the team here. Honestly,
you guys are doing a great job.
Phenomenal. I mean, Brad is his education, his mentorship, and really just his character. I mean, there's a lot of people I've met in this business, and I have met some bad people along my path. I've been in real estate since I was 18. And there's been some people that I met that I'm, not too happy about meeting. But Brad is definitely a guy with a lot of good character. Both the Sumroks, great character. So that's really why I'm on board, and I'm happy to be here for sure.
By the way, if I was on Johnny Carson, I'd have like some water or some coffee. Like they have the mugs and stuff. Like
I can have one of the backstage girls grab you.
Yeah, you got to work on the coffee or something.
I'll do that. Let's talk about 1031s.
Oh yeah.
So obviously, there's a lot of people in our group that I know have been contacting you about 1031s.
Yeah.
There's because the reason is because they're selling deals and they want to invest their money into another deal, and when they're on a 1031, which basically helps you avoid paying capital gains tax on your investment, you're on the clock. You have 90 days to identify a deal.
Right.
And there's a process there. Talk about that and how you help.
Yeah, so 1031, so I just did 2 videos on that. One was how do you 1031 into a syndication? Because a lot of people think you can't do it, because in a 1031 what happens is it has to be what's called a like-kind exchange, right? So if you own a piece of property, you have to then exchange it or sell that one and buy another one. The IRS just considers that an exchange, therefore the name. If you buy it in your personal name, you've got to sell it and buy the new one in your personal name. And in a syndication, you're going into an LLC most likely. So now you're going from personal direct ownership into LLC, and that's not like a like-kind exchange. And so people don't think, well, I just can't do it. And I'm always pitching the idea, like, if you want better or world-class answers, you've got to ask better or world-class questions. So the better question is, well, how do you do that? How do I do a 1031 exchange into a syndication? And the way you do it, and the video is a little bit easier because I've kind of diagrammed it, so it might be a little bit hard to explain. But essentially, the person, let's say I'm the one who's coming in with a 1031 and you're the sponsor, right? So what I do is I sell my property that I own in my personal name. I then own a percentage of your property. So if I own whatever percentage corresponding.
See that? Backstage people, man, helping us out over here. Appreciate that.
Thank you. You just need an audience now.
Yeah, well, just we'll get the fake clapping and oohs and ahs in the background here. Kick it off.
So let's say my capital gain is $100,000, and just for example, and you're buying a property that's $1 million. So my contribution is going to be 10%. Well, instead of being a 10% owner in your LLC, which is the typical way to do it, what I would do is I would sell my property, and then I would become a 10% direct owner into your property, number one. And then your syndication, your LLC, would raise the money into the LLC to buy the remaining 90% of the property. So the LLC owns 90%, I own 10%, and then we tie that together with a TIC agreement, tenants in common agreement, which is very similar to an operating agreement. The sponsor typically is the TIC manager, so they have all the control, and that's how we pull that off. Now, it's not perfect. Again, that's the answer of how you do it, whether it's something you want to do or not. Some of the considerations are you lose a little or potentially a lot of control, because even though the documents say you're in control and when I want to sell it, I can sell it, because I'm on direct title, I have a lot of power and I can definitely thwart that. So if you say, let's sell, and I'm like, I don't want to sell, or maybe I want to sell and you don't want to sell, that becomes one of the issues. And then the other thing you got to be very careful about, which is why I always stress, you've got to work very closely with your 1031 exchange intermediary and also your CPA, and make sure you're not blowing any of your 1031. And that's just the fees that you can take. You got to be very careful. In a typical syndication model, you're taking, an acquisition fee, and you're just kind of taking fees. And with a 1031, you probably can't do that with respect to that 10%. And so you have to take all those fees and really burden the LLC with that. So that's just, again, that's why you want to be working with not only your attorney, but your CPA and your thing. And then what happens, I posted that video, and I got a great question. A lot of people were like, well, great, Mauricio, you told me how to 1031 into a syndication. How do I 1031 out of a syndication? I'm like, that's a great question.
So out of one syndication, you get a passive investor or a co-sponsor?
If you're in a syndication, right, and you're the sponsor, right, and you're like, well, great, this has been a great property, we're going to sell it, but I want everybody to 1031 exchange into the next deal, because that way we can all save our taxes, right? The way to do that, obviously, is you take that LLC, everybody who's in that LLC agrees, and you sell this property, and then you go buy the new property, and that's a 1031 exchange, and you don't pay any capital gain.
Correct.
You defer.
Rarely ever going to happen.
That's the thing. It's like if it's a small syndication, you got 4, 5, 6 people, then that might work. But if you've got 10, 20, 30 people, then there's always going to be that 1 or 2 or 10 people that say, well, no, I mean, this has been great. I want to take my money. I want to take my thing. So one of the ways I've done this, and again, you want to check with your CPA. I always punt to the CPA, because I joke with my buddy Tom. I said, look, you ask the CPA 3 different questions, or 3 CPAs the same question, you get 5 different answers.
Yeah.
So like I stopped trying to argue. I just like whatever your CPA tells me, I'll go with it, because they're the ones who are paying, and they're the ones with the insurance and all that stuff. But the way I like to do it is, let's say you've got 20 people in the syndication, and 3 people are like, I don't want to do it. So you can't just go do it. Buy them out. Get them out of there. So buy those 3 investors out, take them out of the syndication, out of the LLC. They're no longer members of the LLC, and now everybody who's remaining is in agreement to do that. Now, again, there's some challenges. It's easier said than done. You've got to buy them out, so you've got to probably have cash that you could. I was thinking of this afterwards. You could probably do it with a note. You can probably buy them out with a promissory note and say, look, once we're done or whatever, we'll pay whatever. But you've got to get them out. The third way I know how to do it, and I mentioned it was kind of cheating because it's not really a 1031 exchange, but now we have all these. Not now, but we've got all these opportunity zone things, and I'm not to get too deep in that, but now we can actually take capital gains not only from real estate, but even from stocks or precious metals or anything of value, and we can take that capital gain, invest it in an opportunity zone fund that's located in an opportunity zone, and I got to defer the taxes. So it's not quite a 1031 exchange, but I can sell my property, take my gains, put it into this other fund, and I will defer that tax up until it's actually it's supposed to be 10 years, but it's really 7 years, until 2026, December 31st, 2026. So not as great as 1031 because that's indefinite, but you do get to defer it for a good 7 years, and you got some bonuses as well. Not to get, again, this is not an opportunity zone video.
Well, I'm interested.
Yeah. So there's a couple of benefits. There's 4 benefits really. Number 1, you get to defer the tax, right, until December 31st, 2026. Number 2, if you hold the property, if you hold the new property, the fund for 5 years, you get a 10% discount on your capital gains, original capital gains. So you don't only have to pay all the capital gains; you get a 10% discount. Third, if you hold the property for 7 years, you get another 5% discount. So you get a total of 15% discount. So if your capital gains was $100,000, you only pay tax on 85%. Okay. So that's kind of cool. And then the real kicker, supposedly on the opportunity zone, is like any capital gain you gain from that opportunity zone fund, if it's held for more than 10 years, is tax free.
Really?
Tax-free. So if you bought the
This is
building
news
for
to me, so
yeah,
yeah.
if you bought a property for $1 million and 10 years later it's worth $3 million and you got a $2 million capital gains, tax-free.
So how does one find those opportunity zones?
They're all over the country.
Okay.
There's actually a map.
There's
You can map and you can go. And every single major city has at least one zone. So even Manhattan
Really?
has an opportunity zone, and they're in all 50 states. And they're supposed to be geographical areas that are really dilapidated, that need economic, rigor. That's the whole point. Like
Yeah,
they're
it's a heavy lift.
they're trying to get people in there. But the reality is, and one of the criticisms I've heard is that there are some places, especially in California, like in Oakland or even Manhattan, they're not that dilapidated. So you're actually, you're getting all these benefits, and do these communities really need that cash infusion as opposed to maybe, Detroit that really needs the capital infusion.
Which is where I'm from, so
Right.
be careful. All right?
So, but I mean,
No, I totally
Detroit's gone through a really rough
Yeah.
time, and so the neighborhoods like that need the cash infusion. That was the whole point of this, is to not force people, but to encourage people to put money into places they wouldn't ordinarily have done.
It's a smart play.
And in exchange for the tax code, that's what the tax code is anyway, which is a series of incentives, right? To the government makes you act the way they want you to act in order to for
Keep the economy growing.
So that literally just came out. Literally 2 weeks ago they came out with the updated, or not updated, really some guidance, because we didn't have any guidance at all. And so they finally came out with some guidance, which helped us quite a bit. So there's a lot of interest in opportunities
That's
selling
very
funds.
interesting. Yeah.
So anyway,
is there a specific website that they can find it on, or are you going to add that?
PremierLawGroup.net.
There you go. I was going to say for some of those templates, for some of those SEC stuff.
Yeah, well, for that, I'm actually just wrapped up an article on that. So
Okay.
if somebody wants to get a copy of it, just
Do you have a
find it.
resources tab there? Or?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
cool.
I forgot the name of it. It's a blog.
That's
or
okay.
resource or
Yeah.
whatever,
As long as it's there, that's good.
I'll
I'll make sure I hunt down the links and post them below the video.
Or
here
worst
for you
case
guys.
scenario is you can actually contact me. There's a contact thing, so you can just email me
Yeah.
there and I can send it to you.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about this has been great so far. By the way, this is some gold information
Cool,
here.
thanks.
So let's talk about some mistakes, right? Lessons learned. I
Yeah.
always like to kind of wrap up the video with. I have written down here what are 3 biggest mistakes or common mistakes or whatever. I just want to hear kind of what's a lesson you learned from a mistake that's made, or maybe a common mistake.
There's 3. Yeah, the biggest mistake is people either not knowing or thinking they can get around the idea that you're selling a security.
Yeah, that's
So
not,
they get creative, like, oh, well, we're not going to make them part of the LLC. We're going to have a profit sharing agreement, or we're going to do a little handshake and wink, wink, or
Yeah.
whatever. And again, as we stated earlier, the structure itself does not matter, right? It's as if you're taking money from investors and you're generating the returns, it's a security, whether it's whatever. So that's the number one. And again, first-time syndicators don't know any better. They're like, why is securities involved? And then more sophisticated is they think they can outsmart the
Yeah.
SEC. That never happens. They're pretty smart, whatever.
Yeah.
And along those lines, by the way, and we didn't talk about this, but the other big mistake is people paying referral fees to raise money.
You're
We
right.
didn't talk about
Yeah.
that one, and that's a big one. So
That is.
you are not allowed to, people are looking, again, people who are not in Brad's group, they're desperate to find investors, and so they tend to, hey, I can bring in 5 or 10, but I want a piece of the deal,
Yep.
I want a 20% referral fee. Can't do that unless that person's a registered SEC broker dealer, which nobody is unless you go to one. You cannot take referral fees, and so that's the big, and that will categorize you as an illegal offering. So
Yeah.
because you haven't disclosed that, and you just can't do it. So that's
Unless
another
they're
big
like a
mistake.
manager on the deal with skin in the game.
Yes, so there's ways around that. I'm happy to talk about at some point. I mean, there's ways, I don't want to say around it, but there's ways we can structure, again, ask a better question. How do we do it? How do we do it? There's ways we can structure it to make it a legal compensation, but it's got to be more than just raising money. It's got
gotcha.
to do with
Yep.
it. So that's probably the biggest one. The other big mistake I see people is not realizing that they're advertising. And marketing. So they're relying on a 506B that does not allow you to advertise, but they're on Facebook.
Yeah.
And they're doing all
They're
this stuff.
dropping their hints and seeds.
And the hints. And what people don't realize is that it's not just making a direct offer, right? It's not just like, hey, I've got a deal, I'm looking for $1 million, blah, blah, blah. There's something that the SEC calls conditioning the market. And conditioning the market means anything that basically drums up interest in your deal. So talking about past deals, talking about investor returns, talking about, I don't have a deal right now, but I typically get investors 12%
Yeah.
cash or cash returns.
Planting
Call me.
seeds, right?
You're planting the seed. That's called conditioning the market, and that's going to be considered an offer, even though you and I don't think of that as an
Mm-hmm.
offer. So that's another huge mistake, which is why I did that video on if you're getting people, get them legally without pitching your deal, go through those steps, and then you're clean.
That's a huge thing. I see people
that's a
really
huge
walking
one.
in the gray area a lot on Facebook.
And what's
so.
really it's really frustrating, not only for me, but really more frustrating for clients, because it's like everybody does it, or they see that on Facebook, and it's like, well, everybody's doing it, and yeah, everybody's doing it illegally. It's like, the analogy I give is when people are like, I write off my car. They're like, oh yeah, I just write off my entire car, and I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and they're like, well, have you ever been audited? It's like, oh no, I haven't been audited. So people do it, but until they get audited, they're going to get screwed. And so same thing here, and the SEC at some point, or maybe not the SEC, it might be the state regulators, because they're twiddling their thumbs. They have no idea. They've got nothing to do now that all their power has been stripped from this preemption. So when they see stuff like that, they get excited. So that's probably the second big mistake.
So I just want to clarify that real quick, because I want to make sure that we protect not only the Sumrok students, but everybody, honestly, because this is a mistake that really could come back and bite you. So you can't sell a deal. You and I just sold a deal. We made 170% return. We really can't technically share that information publicly. Like just say, oh, we just high five. We just made 150% return on this deal. We hit a home run. Such a great deal. Great. Because that's kind of planting the seed, right? That's me gaining now interest. People are like, oh, well, they're getting good returns, right? And that's illegal.
Yeah, that's illegal. The closest, and again, this is not black and white, so there's some gray. The closest I get somewhat comfortable is if you go into it with the mentality, even if you're buying the building as a syndication, if you go in with the mentality that it's just your deal, so you don't reference investors, but I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, I just got into contract to buy this building, I'm super excited, or I'm here doing my due diligence, as if it's your own project. You're not talking about, I'm doing my due diligence, or my investors are really going to love this, or if you're interested, or some people do the hashtag, ask me how, like whatever, like that. Those are really the things.
They think they're sneaky.
Yeah, they think they're sneaky, and as you know, internet and Facebook is there forever, so they'll be able to go back and take a look at it. But if you're literally just talking about as if it was your personal deal, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some other people may disagree with that, but that's kind of my take on that.
Well, it's always better safe than sorry.
Yeah,
honestly, the gray area with the SEC is a bad area to be in, no matter what. So, and I see it all too common, man. People just sitting at my computer underwriting deals, like handing out checks.
That's I'm handing out. That's another big one. Like, I'm handing out my checks. It's check day or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason Grant Cardone can do that, is because he has a Reg A.
Well, he does too. He does Reg A and 506Cs. That's all he does. That's why he added. So he can do that all day long.
Show, hey, this is what we're giving, right? Because he's general soliciting. So just know that, you guys. It's not okay for everyone, right?
Which is why I was excited about the 506. That's why I think more people should use 506C, because then you eliminate all that gray area, and then you can do all that stuff. You can knock yourself out and talk about your checks and your returns and all that stuff because you're doing a 506C.
Yeah, this is something I see Brad constantly. Brad is constantly reminding the students, even if he doesn't see it. I feel like at least once a month he sends a message to the group to say, guys, just want to remind everybody, do not walk in this gray area. Here's what you need to avoid. He's been very, very adamant about the SEC regulation.
And again, going back to the whole Brad thing, if you're in the Brad group, you don't need to do that. You've got your network. You've got, go to the events, go to your meetups, get to know them. There's no need. Now, if you don't, then I get it, right? If you're desperate and you need more people. So anyway, so that's the thing.
Well, if you're in the group and you hit a home run and all your investors are happy,
you want to share that.
They're allowed to personally talk to their known friends and relationship people, right? In a normal conversation, like, I just see you at the coffee shop. I was in this deal. We hit a home run. We're in the same group. We know each other. We have a relationship. We're not advertising, right? And so that word of mouth in the group does its job for you.
It's the Facebook thing or the web. The other thing is the website. People forget that the website is international. Like, you post something on your website, it goes to the entire world. So your website has to be compliant. You got to make sure you're not pitching your deals. You're not doing any of the conditioning the market in your website. So very important to have somebody take a look at that and make sure that you're doing that website thing. And then the last thing, which is, I don't know if this is a major, I deal with a lot of first-time syndicators, and one of the mistakes I think they have is, number one, not realizing how long it takes to raise the money, right? So they get all excited, they get things, and they don't realize that people may even commit to them, but it may take them a couple more days or a couple more days, especially when you're dealing with IRAs. Money, right? Yeah, so even IRAs take a while, right? So even though it's like, I'm going to give you $100,000, it may take them another 2 or 3 weeks to do. So I always encourage clients to, which is maybe an obvious point, but you want to build in some extensions into that contract, even if you most likely have to pay for them. But build in 1 or 2 30-day extensions so that if you run into that problem where you can't close because you're waiting for a couple of IRA folks that are transferring their account from so-and-so to some self-directed, or it's taking them a long time. You've got that out another 30 or 60 days to extend that. So I think that's, especially for first timers.
Yeah, I agree, because there's a lot of first timers using the IRA funds,
Right.
and using other people's IRA funds,
Right.
and that can sometimes. I mean, it's like, hey, financial advisor for the last 15 years, I need my $400,000,
Right.
and they're like, well,
Right.
I'm gonna make this a pain in the ass for
Right.
you because I don't
Right.
want to come off your money. So
Right.
it's I've seen it become quite an issue.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's important when choosing those companies as well. Awesome, man. This has been a lot of really good information. I wrote down some
Cool.
notes even to follow up with you afterwards
Cool.
myself.
Nice.
So let's tell the people. So you can do your legal anywhere in the United States.
Yep. Even though I'm a California licensed attorney, this is all federal law, so I can do this in all 50 states. And in fact, I do it internationally. So I've got
Okay.
international clients who have international projects,
Oh, yeah.
but they want to raise money here, like in Belize
Yeah.
or Panama or Nicaragua. They want to raise money in the U.S., and so they have to comply with U.S. law. If you're raising money outside of the U.S., by the way, and you're not, and it's a little bit more complicated, but if you're not marketing or selling in the U.S., there's another exemption called Reg S as in Sam, because again, the SEC doesn't care about investors in Panama.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of doesn't. But yeah, that's.
So talk about. So you said you're based out of California.
So I'm based out of California. I do it in all 50 states, and like I said, all internationally, and. Yeah. It's just,
How do we contact you?
best way to contact me, probably the website, premierlawgroup.net. You can always reach me also at team@premierlawgroup.net, TEAM. Facebook, I'm pretty easy to find, and I put a lot of videos there. And I just started a YouTube channel. See how that goes. But
Awesome,
I
man.
just started a YouTube channel.
I love it.
I think today or whenever I have time, I got to switch from private to public because I just started
There you
it.
go.
But you can probably just at some point Google or just whatever, put my name in there on
Sweet.
YouTube, and you'll see.
I'll get you a
bunch
copy of this
videos.
video so you put it on there.
Yeah, put it up there, exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Cool.
I love it.
Cool.
I'm a huge YouTube fan.
Yeah, me too.
I've learned a lot off YouTube
Oh
over
yeah.
the years.
Oh,
Like,
YouTube's
I
the way to
I
go.
can't even tell you.
Oh yeah.
So, and then, okay, so we got your contact information. Anything you want to leave the viewers with?
Reach out to me, especially if you want that report on opportunity zones. I mean, I don't. That's like I'm actually doing a podcast on it. It's not going to be a whole hour on it, but I've got I think it's called. I'm calling it because I'm kind of known as the anti-lawyer. So just because I'm not your typical lawyer, and Tom always says I'm one of the few lawyers that actually speaks English. Which is
Yeah,
kind of fun.
I remember him saying that.
So anyway, it's called the Anti-Lawyer's Guide to Opportunity Zones, and I just kind of go through the good, the bad, the ugly of the rules, and so that if that seems like something you're interested in, just reach out to me and I'll send you a copy.
What about the SEC docs that you said that there's like a doc where it's like a questionnaire, gives you the steps to kind of make sure?
Yeah, I'm happy to send that, or you can either Google it, Citizen VC, or you just shoot
Put
me
it
an
on your
email.
website.
Yeah, put it on my search, shoot me an email,
I'll get the link from there.
and I'll yeah, absolutely.
Make it easy for them. Cool,
Yeah,
man.
sounds
Thank
good.
you so much
Hey,
for being on the show. I
good to
appreciate
see
it.
you again.
Again, thank you guys so much again for watching this video. We hope that you enjoyed the content. I know I sure did. And we're going to put out a lot more content like this. So if you guys did like it, please like the video below. If there's a topic or something you want to hear more about, please make that comment in the suggestions below. And subscribe to Brad's YouTube page. He's also on Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next video, and hopefully you enjoy.